I think it's a good point as well, because obviously this is a newly formed Transport Committee for a new civic year, and we should probably introduce each other to each other, and so we all know who we are, where we come from. So I will start. My name is Susan Hinchcliffe, and I am the leader of Bradford Council and the chair of West Yorkshire Transport Committee. We'll go to councillors first. So Councillor Kaushik.
Morning, everyone. Manisha Kaushik from Kirklees and Deputy Chair on the Transport Committee.
Morning, Councillor Peter Carlill from Leeds. I'm the other Deputy Chair of the Transport Committee.
Councillor Abdul Hanan, Lee City Council, Headingley and Hyde Park.
Liz Rowe, Councillor in Bradford in Windhill and Rose.
Councillor Eric Firth, Kirklees Council, Cabinet Member for Transport.
Scott Patron, Calderdale Council, Cabinet Member for Climate Change, Housing and Active Travel. It's recently changed, so.
Councillor Colin Hutchinson from Skirkheads in Calderdale.
Councillor Aman Khan, Wakefield District Councillor representing Normanton.
Councillor Peter Clark, Bradford Council.
Councillor Neil Buckley from Old Woodley Ward in Leeds.
I'm Councillor Chris Hayden from Bradford.
Councillor Amran Ward, Dewsbury West, Kirklees.
Councillor Oliver Edwards, Guy Sim Rawdon, Leeds City Council.
Jacob Williamson, Councillor from Wakefield.
Hello everyone, Councillor Aine Maloney, Beaton Holbeck Ward in Leeds.
Good morning everyone, Councillor Matthew McLaughlin from the Corn Valley Ward in Kirklees.
And Councillor Helen Hayden from Leeds, Executive Member for Sustainable Development and Infrastructure.
Lovely, thank you. So there's a few microphones down there that sounds a bit odd actually, but anyway, we'll keep working on that presumably. So now to officers. So who are you?
Ian Park, Governance Services Officer for the Combat Authority.
Good morning everybody, I'm Simon Warburton, I'm Executive Director for Transport here at the Combined Authority.
Morning, I'm Melanie Corcoran, Director of Transport Policy and Delivery.
Good morning, I'm Dave Haskins, I'm the Interim Director of Transport Operations Passenger Experience, covering passenger experience and head of assets.
Good morning, Mick Bunting, Interim Director of Transport Operations and Passenger Experience, covering mobility services and transformation.
Good morning, my name's Rachel Jones and I'm the Interim Head of Transport Policy.
Lovely, thank you very much. So all those officers obviously work intensively on transport across rail and bus across West Yorkshire and are here to advise us and take us through some of the papers here today. West Yorkshire Transport Committee, as you will see, is made up from all parts of West Yorkshire. Really important actually to hear those voices. We're a massive place, what, 2.3 million people. We have rural, urban, valleys, hills, flat bits, all points in between. So we are a very diverse place, and obviously our ambition is to make sure that we're all connected because it supports our people lead healthy lives and also our businesses to thrive. So, apologies for absence. Any apologies?
Yes, so we've had apologies from Councillor Bolt, Councillor Caffrey, Councillor Rosshaw and Councillor Salam.
Thank you very much. Declarations of disclosable pecuniary interests, anybody? No? Excellent. Well, if there's anything throughout the meeting, please be aware of that, and you can declare throughout the meeting if you wish to. Exempt information, I don't think we have any today, have we? Minutes of the meeting of the Transport Committee on 26th of May. Obviously those minutes have been circulated. Obviously we've had a bit of a turnover on the committee, as is normal on a civic year turn. But for those members who were there, has anybody got any comments or yes, Councillor Firth.
Thank you, Chair. I did raise a point about the e-bikes in Leeds and about who owned them, insurance cover, and I never got an answer. Because if somebody knocks someone down, an old lady, who is responsible for is it the person driving and the person that owns the bike or Leeds City Council?
So, Councillor Firth, was that not in the minutes then? Is that what you're saying?
I asked a question, but it's not in the minutes.
Right.
I didn't receive an answer either.
So we've expunged the question and therefore the action. Has anybody got an answer to that immediately, or is that something we can commit to come back to very quickly?
Yeah, I think if we commit to circulate a note to members with advice, I imagine that there are specific provisions within the membership arrangement, so we'll extract those and circulate.
I'm sure there are, but it's important that we all know and the public at large know.
Absolutely. So there's some learning coming from Manchester on this as well at the moment. I noticed articles in the press this week. So thank you. If we can get that within, well, can we get that by Monday to members? Because obviously that is something that's outstanding. Thank you. Anything else from those minutes? Councillor Buckley. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, it was on the same subject by coincidence. Page 7 of the minutes on e-bikes, it says that the operator will receive 25% of the profits. And I had a briefing on this the other day from the officer in charge of the scheme in Leeds, and she said that the operator would receive 75% of the profits and 25% would go to Leeds for reinvestment in the scheme. So that's a difference.
Microphone off. Thank you. Yes, I would suggest that actually the company who are making the investment, probably your figures sound accurate to me, Councillor Buckley, that I would imagine they were making most profit if it's not our main expense, but that again needs confirming. So anything else? Obviously e-bike seems to have been a bit of a mess up there in terms of what we said in that meeting. So can we just clarify Councillor Buckley's point there and answer Councillor Firth's question? Anything else that we've missed? No? Well, other than those 2 points, are we happy to accept those minutes as a correct record, subject to that change?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Lovely. Thank you. So, next item on the agenda is bus service improvement plan update. Now, there's multiple strands to this. Do you want to start on BSIP New Enhanced?
That's me, thank you very much, Chair. Right, okay, yes. So it's quite a long report and there's quite a lot of information in it, as Councillor Hinchcliffe has just alluded to. So the purpose of the report is to update Transport Committee on the state of the bus network and the proposed approach to using both BSIP money to manage this and also to seek approval to the delegation for the approval of just over £3.8 million of what's called BSIP Plus funding to the Interim Director of Transport Operations and Passenger Experience, Mobility Services and Transformation to respond to the immediate challenges around the bus network, including service protection as they arise over the coming financial year. So very quickly in the report, Section 2, the start provides a sort of recap and the background of the BSIP. In terms of what's been set out to date. I'd just draw your attention to 2.6, which was at the last meeting of this committee, where approval was given to the development and initial delivery costs of up to around £6.23 million, and that was to fund some further development work, and importantly £3 million for tranche 1 of BSIP bus network protection and quick win enhancements, and then there was 4.23 million almost for enhanced bus services too. So then from section 2.7 onwards, there's an update provided around the sort of current network instability that we're facing, you know, within the sort of primarily commercially operated bus industry. You know, we're all fully aware of the impacts of the COVID pandemic and the cost of living crisis, of course, as well, and the impact that's had on the bus industry and bus network. And that's resulted, as at 2.10, in a number of changes to a number of services across West Yorkshire. And, you know, all of this has resulted in an increase of tendered service spend that the combined authorities have sort of faced over the last few years. So from 2.13 onwards, the report talks about changes to the funding, and at the last meeting of this committee, there was a verbal discussion about this because the announcement had only just been made just before the committee meeting. So this paper sets out detail in writing around that. And the fact that, you know, the middle of May, government announced the replacement of the sort of funding mechanism around bus recovery grant, and sort of is replacing that with different methods of providing grant, with grants to operators across 2 financial years and also to authorities. So as it says in 2.14, nearly 3.9 million has been awarded to the Combined Authority, or will be awarded to the Combined Authority, to protect some services this financial year. And we're expecting something similar next year as well, but we haven't had confirmation of that as yet. As we understand it, the operators have, what they've received by way of this new mechanism is around 50 to 60% of the previous support that was provided through government. So we're obviously, as the Combined Authority, we're working to understand the full anticipated changes as a result of this, and you know that is likely to result in more changes. And we're continually working with the operators to try and get them to defer any changes or cuts until September 2023. So where we are then in terms of funding availability, section 2.19 onwards, that clearly sets out what the Combined Authority must act to do in the context of all of this, around continuing to provide those socially necessary services, around restoring and stabilising the network from further cuts, and also as in line with the BSIP objectives around that sort of enhancement and growing of the network. So table 1 sort of sets out the different funding pots that are available at this time, and how we sort of are going to try and sort of utilise those and work across the partnership and with the bus industry to sort of implement that. Section 2.22 summarises the workshop that was held about a month ago with the Transport Committee and the sort of key messages coming out of that as well. So moving on then, in terms of the sort of network support and network transformation criteria, it's sort of looking at and recognising the need to both balance transformation through the BSIP money whilst also looking at how sort of we protect and support the existing network as it stands, and using those different pots of money in order to do that. And so there's some criteria that's been proposed that's set out in table 2 of the report, which is looking at how the intention is to approach that around growing and improving while at the same time sort of protecting and supporting. So the next steps following on in the report are looking at how we're sort of looking to do that. So we're obviously working with bus operators now to fully understand the implications of the upcoming service changes and how best to deploy that circa 3.8 million BSIP plus money that's recently been announced to us. And if you recall at the May's Transport Committee, what we're hoping to do as well with the BSIP money, that the £3 million that you approved at your last meeting, we're looking to agree with the Combined Authority Chief Executive in consultation with the Mayor and the Transport Committee, the specific services that will be sort of contracted with that first tranche of money, and we're hoping to have those operational from the autumn this year. We're also working on a business case to secure a second tranche of BSIP money to similar value to the first tranche, to again provide some further enhancements to services from quarter 1 in 2024. And finally at 2.3, then we're actively in discussions with operators around the enhanced bus services schemes that you approved at the last meeting, and around £4.3 million, with a view to also getting those schemes up and running from the autumn, and at the same time we're exploring with operators and Wakefield Council around looking at some of the sort of remaining money within that pot, and looking at potential schemes in the Wakefield area. Finally, the final bit of the sort of section 2 just gives you an update on some of the wider elements of BSIP. You know, there's a lot of activity going on beyond the bus network as well. Obviously, there was an approval last time round to continue with the Mayor's Fairs until at least March next year, and some funding approved for that. We are from October hoping to have a number of BSIP funded police community support officers deployed at our bus stations across West Yorkshire, and then there's obviously quite a lot going on around investment in the capital investment in improvements in the highway network to support buses and improve reliability and connectivity. So moving to the recommendations at section 10, 10.1, that the Transport Committee endorses the approach to further developing the bus network plan as set out in the report in order to sort of continue to provide the socially necessary connectivity to restore, stabilise and protect the network from further cuts, but also around enhancement and growing the network in line with those different funding sources. 10.2, that the Transport Committee approves delegation on the just over 3.8 million BSIC Plus, which is new funding that we understand we're going to be in receipt of from DFT, and that approval for how that money is spent is delegated to the Interim Director of Transport Ops and Passenger Experience, Mobility Services and Transformation in consultation with the partner councils for this financial year. And then finally at 10.3, that the Transport Committee notes the next steps for delivery of the bus network plan and the wider BSIP programme updates. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much. And first of all, thank you to officers for trying to obviously make sure that the services keep going as comprehensively as possible across the network, in spite of these government cuts that we see coming down the line all the time. Because obviously buses are something that all our residents and businesses rely on absolutely to get around every day. And therefore, you know, it's imperative that you keep doing that work to keep the services as comprehensive as possible. We don't yet have this 3.8 million that we've been promised, do we? So we're actually approving something we don't have yet. Do we know when government are actually going to give us this, or whether there's any confirmation of the amount? And
officers do have a meeting in the next week or so with Department for Transport, so we're hoping we'll get some clarity around that then.
So this is part of the problem, that we just can't plan ahead because we never know what we're going to get, when we're going to get it. And all the way along, since the pandemic, it is very much hand to mouth trying to plan a transport network, and that's no way to run an economy in West Yorkshire. Councillor Calder, did you want to come in first on this matter?
I can do. I think you've covered the majority of it, Chair. I think what we really need is for that money to come through to start building back what we want, which is stability in the network to allow us then to move forward. Unfortunately, all the time there's been a delay in knowing that funding. We have lost other services, as I know many of you have had emails and responded and come back to me with concerns from residents about services that have been lost over the last while. You'll note in the report that operators have informed us that they are now receiving almost half the amount of money that they were before as that top up. Obviously, inflation has gone on beyond that, so their cost of services are going up is their view, yet the amount of funding they've got has decreased. We have, therefore, because we haven't got this funding, asked all operators to delay those changes over the summer. I think it notes in the report, obviously, that there are 70 plus changes already happened over the last 18 months, and they will have to go in for consideration of services we bring back. But it's my understanding that from speaking to operators, almost as many of that are at risk. Some of those have been made by operators ahead of the request we made, but I do thank officers who have ensured that the majority of those have been postponed to allow us to get access to this money to see if we can at least have a stable network that then we can build on top of. Unfortunately, we as yet don't know exactly when that money will come through.
Thank you, Councillor Carlow. I've got Councillor Edwards first.
Thank you, Chair. And I'd also like to put on record my appreciation of the work that officers are doing. I realise that it's very difficult planning with something that keeps changing and where there's all the uncertainty. And this is particularly important in my ward and also in other Outer Leeds wards as well. So one of the services that Councillor Carlisle mentions where the operator did not delay the change was at 27, and so for myself and other ward councillors, we've heard countless examples of people whose lives have been completely disrupted, people who can no longer get to work, essential workers, people working in the nighttime economy, students, and this decision has really impacted a lot of people's lives. It's also left communities without any alternative bus provision at many times of the day. And so I recognise the work that's being done, but that's of no comfort to residents who've lost services. And what's also particularly disappointing in the case of First is that they posted profits last year of 82.1 million, which I understand was double what they had the previous year before that. How can we justify that? How can that be justified to my residents and other residents across West Yorkshire who are seeing these essential services cut and with very little regards from the companies about the absolutely devastating impacts that has on people?
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. I'll take some more before coming back to officers. Councillor Firth.
Thank you, Chair. I'm very much on the same point. People out there that we represent have a little understanding of what we do and the constant battle that we have with the transport providers. We're getting little local councils in our part of the world getting a lot of heat from colleagues. So in order to explain this better, I've contacted my colleague, Amar Anwar, to organise the first of our district meetings to be held in Kirklees as soon as possible, so we can better explain what we're doing and what they are doing to us. And of course, the bus companies will be invited. Just to let that point of information, I think you'd like to know, and I'm sure other colleagues feel the same way, because your residents, your constituents, are in the dark as well, you know. So let's tell them what we're doing. Let's tell them how we're doing it. We've got some great officers, by the way, who are really, really working hard to maintain what we've got. But it's important that the public out there know what we're doing on their behalf, you as officers and us as members. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Firth. Councillor Hutchinson.
Recognising the problems of working with the hand-to-mouth, just-in-time delivery of funding on planning services, it's still no comfort to the people of a large swathe of North Halifax, where very deprived communities live, where lots of people work in the health, social care, nighttime economy, to have the bus services after 9 p.m. cut from that whole area. We're putting in capital funding for a new bus station which serves that area, the A629 improvement for bus priority north of Halifax, and yet the people of Ovenden and Illingworth lose their only bus service as a result of the cuts that have been put in place from the beginning of this week. It really does makes our balance, you know, we're trying to stimulate bus passenger numbers by improving the infrastructure, but the service that they're seeing is deteriorating. This goes against Investment Policy 5, and it goes against the network support criteria in Table 2 in Section 2.25. And it does, contrary to the report, it does have implications for equality and diversity, particularly for people who are visually impaired, who have who by definition can't drive. They lose their only public transport means to get to and from the centre of Halifax. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hutchinson. Yes, concerns noted, really, and I think that's something you probably can replicate it all across the region. We all have instances which are similar to the words you outlined there. Councillor McLaughlin.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and I'd totally like to echo the comments made by all my previous colleagues. First, in thanking the officers and Councillor Carhill for the extremely important work that they are doing and the hard work. It's an unenviable task, even with a cooperative government, it would be an unenviable task. I just want, given that this 3.8 million BSIP Plus, as we're calling it, isn't actually official yet, which was news to me, what has the government even bothered to proffer any excuse as to why they haven't given this money in time to coincide with the cuts they've made, so that we could have stopped some of these, or potentially looked at working with the bus companies to lessen some of these cuts in time? Because it seems to be habit for them. I've not been around very long. I've only been on this committee for just over a year, and it seems like at every stage the government, it's last minute decision, it's uncertainty and it's delay, and those things in and of themselves cause damage on top of the damage that would already be done by what is always a cut. Have they bothered to even dare to say this is why we haven't done it in time?
So just to reassure you as well, we're not waiting as a combined authority to spend that money. So we're forward thinking about how it's going to be commissioned. But of course, we do need the money in the account before we can actually go out and commission. So we're not wasting any time, but we need to know when we're going to get it. Do you want to come back on those? Because I've got a few more people want to come in.
Shall I pick? So, I mean, first of all, thank you to members for your understanding and support for the work that the team is undertaking. We've been through several years of churn. Of course, we're not alone in West Yorkshire, and it's very difficult to maintain a bus service improvement plan, which was written really as we were going into the pandemic, where we currently find ourselves. It's incredibly frustrating for the team that there hasn't been a timely process to allocate the money. We do have in writing the figure from the department, so we can plan with a certain degree of confidence. But as you say, Chair, we can't ultimately commit funds that we don't have in the bank, and we've been making this very clear to departmental colleagues on a very regular basis. The points around evening services, I think, are really well made. We recognise that actually increasingly, particularly younger members of the community are reliant on the evening economy for their employment, and we're looking to make that very clear both to bus operators and to the department. And of course, it's fundamental to the vitality of our centres as well, that people can access them at all times of the day. And Councillor Firth is absolutely right. It's incredibly difficult to explain this situation to the public, because ultimately what we want to be able to do on your behalf is to engender the best possible confidence in the travelling public that public transport is still a logical and reliable option for them. That's fundamental in terms of achieving both a sustainable public transport system, but also the wider objectives that we're looking to achieve as a city region. Nonetheless, and we have been working with yourself, Chair, and Councillor Carlisle, we are going to use appropriate media material to make it clear that level of stability that will remain is only there through due to timely action on behalf of the team with your support as members. So we will do that, but I think in a way, as much as we possibly can do, that doesn't shake the public's confidence in using public transport. Thank you. And just to Councillor Edwards' point, the Mayor did write to First Bus, yes, didn't she, about the profits of that company, and said, can they really, think about how they're pushing that pressure down the line so we can retain the bus services we need? Yeah. So just so Councillor know that representation was made. I've got Councillor Buckley now and Councillor Williamson.
Thank you, Chair. On page 12 at 2.3, the first three bullet points, to increase weekday mode share on radial routes into district centres by 5%. And the next one is to increase housing accessibility via core network to 55%. Well, is that 5% or is it 5 percentage points? And is the next one, what's that? 55% of what? And 70% of what, please?
So my understanding, Chair, is that it is looking to increase on the base of where we find ourselves, which is 2019 base within BSIP, by 5%, and then by 10%. The accessibility measure is around the level of housing that is within, I think, if I remember, correct me if I'm wrong, Rachel, 400 metres walk-up access of a suitably frequent bus route. And of course, we want to continue to drive that up. It's absolutely fundamental from a modal shift perspective, and to place it into some context in terms of the challenge that lies ahead of us. Even in the evening in London, over 90% of the population is within 400 metres walk up of a frequent bus system. So we have some way to go.
Yes, and obviously that's something we're pushing for quite frequently. Of course, there's a London-style bus network. Councillor Williamson.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to welcome the news about the Combined Authority officers working with Wakefield Council on the Superbus scheme. There's a couple of questions I do have, which is there any information on how we monitor that scheme if there is one introduced? Because I do understand, if I'm right, that it's publicly funded for 3 years, and then this operator has a commitment to further run that for another 2 years. So I think there's concerns in Wakefield about how, if it turns out not to be as commercially viable as maybe other routes, if there might be, there'd be a worry that they might want to pull out of that sort of service if there is one established. And is there, in terms of promoting the bus, any new bus service, is that something that's done by sort of the Combined Authority, the operator, local authorities, or like a mixture of all three, just to try and drive up any sort of use of that service? Thank you.
Who wants to go at that? Mick.
In terms of where I think there's an order of events here, Council, in terms of getting some stability in the network with the BSIP Plus funding that we've got, and protecting and restoring some of the services that we've talked about that have been lost over the last 12 to 18 months. And my team have now developed a plan in which we're going to come out and engage with each individual district to inform the plan of how we're going to deliver on that, to embed a platform on which we can deliver some of the service improvements through BSIP and Superbus. So that's, we anticipate that will be done by the end of this month, that engagement, to get the understanding of each district, and to give us that platform on which to operate. In terms of how we're going to monitor the performance of the enhancements, it's a little bit too early to go into that detail at the moment. What we're looking at as a priority is to get that stability, getting passenger confidence in the network in light of all the recent reductions through BSIP Plus, and then using the BSIP and Superbus funding to enhance that level. But you are right that in years 4 and 5 of Superbus, the model suggests that through marketing campaigns and developing and enhancing customer and passenger confidence, that those new routes will become more commercially viable, and that's the aim of these enhancements, and that's why the investment is in there to give a platform for operators to push those services forward. And it all goes hand in hand with the tender programme that we currently have, and that we will be working on to review through the BSIP Plus funding. So it's an immediate issue with the BSIP Plus, and we've talked about, not too sure when we're going to get that, but there is a commitment to that, and therefore the plans are in place to develop that, and then to use that as a springboard into these enhancements. And how that will play out in years 4 and 5 is yet to be seen, but that's the plan.
Lovely, thank you very much for that. Councillor Carroll.
Just wanted to come in very briefly on the end, because the comment was made, I think, around the just-in-time funding, and I wanted to just support colleagues in Wakefield and other of the areas, South East Leeds and Kirklees, that are supported by other operators. Some operators obviously did make changes over the last 18 months, 12 months ago, when the uncertainty in the funding was there. I had a really good example. Last night I was at a meeting in Armley talking about buses, and they had a service that was cut some months ago, that the last bus on a Monday to Saturday is 7 p.m. and the last bus on a Sunday is 9 p.m. And they were asking, why is this like this? Well, the pure answer is we pay for the service on a Sunday until 9 p.m. But unfortunately, the commercial service on the Monday to Saturday has been cut back. Now, that is a service that an operator should return, really. And I don't think we should start funding what we see as core routes, as that one is at that time. But just to reiterate that this 3.9 million that we'll receive, some of it will be spent on restoring those services that we didn't have funding for, that went by the wayside 12 months ago, just as much as it will in protecting the services that we may lose. And as I say, 70 plus services were lost already, or reduced already, but there's almost the same amount, I think, at risk, operators are telling us, if no funding comes forward.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll, and thank you for your work on this paper and all the work within it as well. If there's no more comments or questions on this paper, we'll move to the decisions on here. The recommendations are clear about the 3.8 million when we get it, and hopefully we get it very soon. We need to delegate the powers to spend it, as outlined with the priorities, and the workshops actually we've had as well on this. We've had workshops as a committee, and thank you for that. So can I see all those in favour of the recommendations please show? Any against? No abstentions? Lovely, thank you, that is carried. So now moving on to the next item on the agenda then, East Leeds Flexibus trial, and I believe this is Mick to speak to, Mick Bunting, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So yeah, I'll just go through this report, take it as read, but I'll quickly go through the report in terms of the purpose of the report, what DRT sought to achieve, and the results of the review and thereafter. So the purpose of the report is to update Transport Committee following a recent internal review of the demand responsive transport service in East Leeds, and to advise the Transport Committee of the proposed early termination of the East Leeds Flexibus service in accordance with the terms of the trial, which was in the original contract for the trial. So just to quickly go through what DRT is. DRT, demand responsive transport, is different to our fixed routes that you see out there every day in the bus network. They're a flexible and agile bus service that allow passengers to, on demand, call for transport at designated locations throughout the district in which they operate. It's a digitally enabled service which allows people to make their bookings through an online or smartphone app. And the aim of this pilot was to provide a new bus service model that would improve people's access to jobs and opportunities, and provide connection to rail, park and ride services, and to contribute to reducing air pollution and carbon emissions. There were some wider objectives around developing our understanding of the impact of DRT, and improving our knowledge and understanding of new and innovative ways of helping people to get around hard to reach communities and wider, and to enhance public confidence in public transport within West Yorkshire, and to connect people to core networks. So the original costs of the service were around 3 million, 1.5 million operating costs over 3 years, and approximately the same in capital investment into the vehicles. There was a break clause in the contract that allowed, after 18 months, in accordance with the terms of the trial, for us to exercise that break clause, and this report is to respectfully advise you that decision has been taken on the basis of an evidence-based approach, following an internal review of the data that our teams have got through the trial. Initially, after 6 months, we commissioned Go Travel Solutions to review the impact of the trial, and you can see in Appendix 1 the report that was done 6 months after the implementation, which happened in September 21, and the review done 6 months after that. where we are right now, in 2.7, there are 242 passengers per week using the 6 vehicles. There's 7 vehicles purchased, 6 vehicles in operation, 1 spare. Although, as highlighted in the report, there have been some issues with the vehicles, which often means that we don't have all 6 vehicles on the road, which has also impacted on service delivery. But 242 passengers per week on average, taking 627 trips, which is a lot lower than we anticipated in the original business case, which set out to seek a return of 15% of the ongoing revenue costs of £40,000 per month and the 1.5 million over the 3 years. And these numbers work out at £16 per passenger journey, which is significantly more expensive than the £3 per passenger journey criterion within our normal non-school tendered services for socially necessary routes. And the 15% target has not been achieved and currently operating at around 12% of the revenue costs. In terms of the achievements of the Flexibus, around 22% of the trips have been made to St James's Hospital, and that's perhaps one area of success here in terms of getting key workers and medical staff to work and getting people to medical appointments from hard to reach areas, deprived areas where there is a low percentage of people who own cars. Into the interchange, only 2% of booked trips connected people to Crossgates rail station and 0 trips to the park and ride, so that hasn't worked out as was originally anticipated in the business case. And 59% of service users had previously walked or used other modes of public transport before using DRT, and only 9% of those have previously used cars. So that modal shift element is not particularly made out in these figures either. So in relation to the BSIP criteria, in terms of serving areas of deprivation and increasing access to employment, connecting health, care and education, investing in enhanced services, we've not seen that through the data in terms of the numbers that we've got. And we've got additional pressures in terms of first indicating that their initial quotes for the 3-year costs were underestimated, and due to the pressures that we all know about in terms of inflationary pressures, increased labour costs and the like, First have come back to us with a new price in terms of how that's going to play out into the next 12 months if we were going to do this, and the passenger price per passenger journey would go up to £40, so more than double what it is now. And obviously that lends itself, given that this service is a first and last mile service, so relatively short journeys, the £40 per passenger journey doesn't stand up to any further scrutiny in terms of a business case. So this report, really going to the recommendation, is to respectfully advise of the proposed early termination of the service, but to reassure members of the work that's now going to take place in terms of mitigations and communications. So in terms of the plan that we talked about with regards to the BSIP Plus and the review of the tender programme and working on the socially necessary routes there, this will now form part of those discussions and an understanding of the impact that this has had on those hard to reach communities and service users of the Flexibus, and to establish whether anybody is now unable to move around in the way that they could as a result of the removal of the service, though an initial review of current services suggests that this was competing with existing services rather than complementing them, which suggesting that people do have alternative services on which to travel, and that's borne out again by the 9% figure with regards to people moving from modal shift from cars into this service. There's going to be follow-up work in the area. As we said, we're going to do an area-by-area engagement anyway with our tender programme and BSIP Plus, and we'll have discussions with districts and leaders and communities to establish that impact and continue with our EQIA, and EQIA was done in the original implementation of this, and we'll do another one to establish exactly what those impacts are going to be, so that we can put those mitigations in place, and to develop a communication plan that will keep communities and leaders informed, and that will help the transition into the other modes of transport that are currently available, and that can potentially be re-established on the back of the tender framework that we're going to develop on the back of BSIP Plus. And that's it.
Lovely, thank you very much. And obviously, this is something which, you know, it's important to trial these things, isn't it? Because you learn from them. And I think there's some pilots across the country that are coming up to similar conclusions now as well. This is not an outlier in that respect. I don't know if is there any comments or questions, Councillor Hutchinson?
Thank you, Chair. Coming from representing a borough that has a large rural hinterland, and a very, very limited core network, we're not going to realistically see scheduled bus services serving those smaller communities. And so demand responsive travel is something we are extremely interested in. I do hope that the experiences of this trial don't pour cold water on the whole idea, but are used to learn from, particularly things like maybe the rather ambitious size of the vehicles to start off with, and the limitations in range capacity as a result of the weight and size of those vehicles, and where smaller wheelchair, albeit wheelchair accessible vehicles, may be able to provide the service at better cost effectiveness. So I do hope it doesn't scotch the whole idea across the authority.
Councillor Patient.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to build on that, really, and I think what would be really interesting, because clearly we're keen to track how this moves, and it's in its relatively early days, but as Councillor Hutchinson said around the hinterlands, and not just hinterlands, but extremely steep hills, especially in the ward I represent, I think what would be really good is if we could have a little bit of a look across the nation where services like these have been done in rural and semi-rural areas, specifically ones with, sort of, hilly geography and topography. That'd be really interesting, because I think how that's managed and the social isolation issues that come as a result, because just looking at and I'm very sorry, I don't know the geography of this area that well, but it looks reasonably well served in terms of amenities and population densities and stuff. That's less true in wards like I represent and Councillor Hutchinson and others, so just a watchful eye on that element, please.
Can I have now Councillor Buckley, please?
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to look at page 23 at 210, where it says the operating range of the electric vehicles is significantly less than the 100-mile range quoted. And this is quite interesting, isn't it? Because necessitated vehicles returning to the depot, well, that's a major cost implication. And it strikes me that if we're not careful, this whole EV range business is going to turn into another diesel problem that we had before, where manufacturers just said, oh, the particulates are this and that, and it was all nonsense. And I just wonder about this range business. How big was the gap between the predicted range and the actual experience?
Do you want to come back on that, and then we'll go to Councillor Hayden, I think.
Sure, just to come back to all the points, Councillor Hutchinson, Councillor Patient, just to reassure you that a full lessons learned exercise will be conducted now, and we absolutely don't rule out future programmes, and that we're always looking at innovative ways of connecting people in our rural and semi-rural communities, as well as in our deprived areas, in this case in parts of East Leeds. So that is absolutely the next stage for us in terms of the mitigations and forming not only the review of the tendered programme, but also looking at this specifically at how it hasn't worked as we expected and what that might mean for other areas. So there isn't, in your words, Councillor Hutchinson, cold water hasn't been poured over it, and we will keep our minds open, and we're always looking at innovative ways to carry people around. In terms of the issue with the vehicles, Councillor Buckley, I think it was, yes, these vehicles were commissioned around 2 or 3 years ago. There's been a number of issues with them. They are now decommissioned, no longer being manufactured as a result of some of the problems that have been exposed to. We did go back to the manufacturer and exercised the terms of the warranty to try and fix some of these problems. But again, looking at the lessons learned, I think in terms of commissioning the vehicles and the purchase of those vehicles, that's something that we will certainly look at. But again, as moving forward, as technology advances quickly in this key area, that is hopefully a mistake that won't be repeated, but noted and something that is being looked at. Thank you.
I'll bring you back in a minute, Councillor Buckley. Just also, it just mentioned in the background documents about equality impact assessment. Can you just sort of go through what's in that, just for the purpose of the meeting? Then I'll bring Councillor Buckley back in.
Yes, so the equality impact assessment, excuse me, has been conducted. The problem, to some degree, the problem with it is being completely open and transparent, is that that we don't collect a lot of data on passengers, as you'll appreciate in the commercial world. There's very little data, if any. But in this area, the only thing that people have to register is the name and an email address to get onto the app. So the equality impact assessment has been done, but it's more qualitative rather than quantitative, and I think we need to look into that in more detail. What I've asked my teams to do is to start working and engaging with service users and to do some kind of survey to try and understand the needs of the people, but to get a breakdown of the demographic of service users is proving difficult at the moment, but that is work that we are trying to do. Just one example that I asked them in preparation for this meeting to look at by virtue of the name, and not making any assumptions of gender based on name, but looking at the names. There were around 80% of service users that identified with a female name, and that might suggest something about perceptions of safety on transport. So that's something that we're looking into as something. I wasn't expecting that. I asked for it and got that 80% figure. So that is something that we're absolutely focused on looking at and developing the richness of the EQIA on the back of not having any substantive data at the moment.
Thank you. But there's nothing in that EIA to suggest this, to inhibit this decision today, is there really?
There's nothing, Councillor, and in fact we've got accessible public transport network routes for all already in place that mitigate this, and we've not identified any individual or groups of people that will now not be able to be transported around on the back of this decision. Yes.
Councillor Buckley, sorry to interrupt, carry on.
All right, thank you, Chair. On this business about the EV range and all this, how much was the difference between the predicted range and what actually happened? Because as it's stated here, this necessity to have to go back to the depot to recharge is obviously a big cost factor and skewed the figures badly. And did we get compensation from the manufacturers because of this?
So, Chair, yes, I understand that there was a renegotiation of the service agreement with the vehicle provider. It remains an issue generally in the market for these MIDI-sized buses that at present the industry is struggling to bring forward the range that we would like to be able to see on this level of buses. Far less of an issue when we get to full-size zero-emission buses, partly because of the sheer scale of the market at full-size bus, and therefore there are bigger actors who have addressed these issues, but it does remain an issue at this size of vehicle, and in many ways part of the reason, as I understand it, that this was brought in as a pilot arrangement.
Thank you very much. And obviously this is something that has been going across the country, all these pilots, so, and everybody seems to be coming to the same conclusion. Councillor Hayden.
Not at all. Thank you, Chair. Just on that point about the range, it depends on the time of year as well. Cold weather affects batteries negatively, as I'd only found out this year. And obviously, if in the cold weather, when you have to have the demisters on, when you have to have the heating on, the bus is working at capacity, then it drains the battery even quicker. So, I mean, it's all part of the learning, isn't it? I'm gutted that this is not going to happen. I mean, it's my part of the world, and I know a lot of people who love this service, who have used it, I mean, there's over 240 people use it every week. So, but we are quite well served. But for buses, but I'm thinking about those housing estates like Colton and the Temple Gates in my ward, that it's that a door-to-door service that this provided, and it's really interesting that 80% have a female-sounding name, and it'd be really good to get some even further detail, because that brings into the safety aspect of having to walk to a bus stop, wait there, and it might turn into a ghost bus. And as particularly people of a certain age, I was at a bus stop last year, and this lady said to me, "I don't have one of your magic phones," So it's she relies on and you might get there and it might say 15 minutes or half an hour. Particularly, I know it was used a lot, and the figures are to go to St James's, which from my house is about a 10-minute drive. St James's is in East Leeds, it's an inn in East Leeds, but from most parts of East Leeds you have to get 2 buses, and it can take you an inordinately long time to get to St James's. I'm also really concerned about those key workers who obviously been using them, and I think the learning from this, my plea would be on both sides of people getting to appointments in one journey. I would really like to see something developed that will plug that market. I'm thinking maybe the access bus or something like that. And then with key workers, if we could do something with the hospitals around getting them to, in one journey, I think that'd be really good learning to take from this. But can I end on thanking everybody? I know that the access bus team who put this into place have worked extremely hard. They're really sad. I know people who were on first name terms with the drivers and indeed had their mobile phone numbers, and they've become really key part of our community. So I'd like to thank those drivers and everybody who worked on this scheme and the service that they provided for the last 2 years. Sorry, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hayden. Well spoken. And I think just going on from that, this is not the end, is it? We need to find a solution for this last mile challenge that shows how many people need to go to the hospital, and that'll be replicated in the entire West Yorkshire. How do you do that last mile? And that is an answer which we still need to find a response to.
A quick point on that, if I may, Chair, on that specific point. Part of the review that we're doing and the lessons learned, I've asked specifically to for the team to liaise directly with St James's to see if we can work on that problem. That I see there's a change. Then there's 2 buses required for some passengers to get to St James's. And that's going to be a specific element of the review for us to look at that and see if we can find any solutions to that issue. An access bus might be it, but it's certainly in view as part of the review. So thank you for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we have a paper there. I think there's recommendations we note. Can just see all those in favour, please show. All those against. Abstentions. That is carried. Thank you very much. Moving on now then to transport policy update. Rachel, I think you're going to start with this. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. So at this meeting is just a couple of things to update the committee on. in this paper. So as per usual, the purpose of the report is to provide an update on transport policy developments that are relevant that aren't picked up elsewhere on the agenda. So if you recall, if you were on the committee at the last meeting, there was a verbal update given on Active Travel Fund 4 outcome. We weren't able to give a written update because the announcement was made after the papers had been published, so we're bringing it to this meeting. So very briefly, the paper sets out what funding has been we've successfully received in previous rounds of funding specific to active travel schemes, and that's set out in table 1 of the report at 2.1. And obviously that money has come through Department for Transport, and now we've got Active Travel England, which is a subsidiary of Department for Transport. So then it moves on the report just to give an update of the process we went through at the beginning of the year, which some of you may recall, around the bid that was put in by the Combined Authority on behalf of West Yorkshire for a programme, a package of a number of schemes right across the West Yorkshire area. We did get an announcement on the 22nd of March, which was just as we went into the pre-election period, and West Yorkshire was in fact successful in receiving 17.43 million, which was one of the highest allocations made by Active Travel England nationally. Now, the bids that were put in were assessed against a number of key objectives, including value for money, compliance with design quality standards, and some other key objectives as well. And Table 2 provides a breakdown of the schemes by district, showing the successful ones and the amount of money allocated, and whether in each case the money is for development of a scheme or actual delivery of the scheme on the ground. Plus, the right-hand column of the table does list those schemes that weren't successful as part of the announcement. And it's important to note that there was also a change request for the A660 Otley Road corridor scheme, which was part of Active Travel Fund 3. And so there was an additional 5.69 million in that allocation that was made to us on top of the 17.43 towards that scheme that was approved. So there has been some feedback provided from Active Travel England, and there's meetings been set up to sort of look at that in more detail for those schemes that weren't successful, and how we look to sort of develop them to bring them forward for any future rounds of active travel funding. And Active Travel England at 2.9 have indicated there will be a further round of active travel funding, which will probably be in autumn next year. However, you know, it has already been sort of suggested that it'll be a much more fiscally constrained opportunity than previous rounds and what we previously may have anticipated. So alongside this, the capital money for development and delivery, there was also 2.53 million awarded in January through the Active Travel Capability Fund, and that's very much around supporting scheme development and officer training to support development and delivery of schemes on the ground. So the Combined Authority has submitted a package level strategic outline case for both the Capital Active Travel Fund 4 money and also the capability money, and that is subject to the next agenda item under the project approvals, when you'll get more information about that. Just finally to say on it that there has, since the announcement, there has been a number of meetings taking place already between Active Travel England and Bradford Council and Leeds City Council, and there's also been a successful first annual review meeting held between Active Travel England and the Combined Authority as well. And then the second bit of the report just provides a couple of updates with regards to Transport for the North business. Firstly, around the Strategic Transport Plan, or STP2, as it seems to be known as. And as you're probably aware, Transport for the North is currently out to public consultation for a draft Strategic Transport Plan 2. You know, and obviously that plan provides that sort of high-level strategic opportunity to speak with one voice on behalf of the North, and sort of provides that statutory advice on sort of how we sort of what our strategic transport priorities are right across the North, and it provides that context for what we're doing within West Yorkshire with the development of the new Mayor's West Yorkshire Local Transport Plan. So the STP2 is sort of built on three core strategies around looking at the economy, independent economic review, very much looking about rapid transport decarbonisation, and then looking particularly around socially inclusive transport and transport-related social exclusion. So the consultation, anybody can take part. The Transport for the North have had a number of virtual workshops, drop-in sessions, some face-to-face ones as well, and obviously all the information is available on their website, and the consultation ends in August, and I believe they're hoping to have an adopted, fully approved strategic transport plan at the end of this calendar year as it goes at the moment. And then the last bit of the paper is just a quick update. The Rail North Committee, which met on the 7th of June, not the 7th of July, as it reports in the paper, because that's today. The substantive items were around the appointment of the chair and vice chair, which Councillor Hinchcliffe has appointed as one of the vice chairs. A second vice chair vote has been deferred to a future meeting. I think also members of the committee looked at operator business plans. There was a discussion around the Manchester Task Force and what the implications are more broadly than just in Manchester, and looking at the general approach to infrastructure planning. And then there was an operational update where there was obviously discussion around TransPennine and TransPennine Express services. And the next meeting is September. So in section 10, the recommendation is that the committee notes the updates provided in this report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Rachel. So a few things on this. Firstly, with the feedback from Active Travel England, can we make sure that happens in detail on each of those schemes as soon as possible? Because obviously autumn next year is not that far away in terms of if we've got to do extensive work on schemes that we all put in which didn't get over the line. And therefore, you know, it is imperative they meet with us very soon on the detail of it. And if we could do that with the combined authority, Active Travel England and the local authority all at the same time in the same room, that would be really helpful. Is that possible? And if you need me to write a letter or pick up the phone to somebody to make that happen sooner, that'd be great. So I'm just aware they're a new organisation that are a bit stretched, but we do need to make sure we get that priority.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Those meetings are now in the diary and taking place in the next couple of weeks with exactly the representatives that you're referring to, so thank you.
Thank you very much. I mean, obviously you mentioned Rail North Committee as well, and what wasn't known at Rail North was the extensive effects that we're going to have that's just been announced on the stations, was it really, and ticket offices, which is very concerning that I just had a briefing on. I don't know, Councillor Kaushik, did you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, very shocking news, like the ticket offices are closing, but we are really concerned and worried about the elderly people and the people, those who have got disabilities. And those stations you are closing, they are very popular. And one way we are saying we want to encourage the people to use the public transport. On the other hand, we are closing all these stations. And where their operators are saying there are machines. But I can give you an example about Huddersfield, hardly working. And if it's working, not everybody can have got the access to do that. So very much concerned about, but we are saying not to close all these things.
Thank you, Councillor Kaushik. And just to be clear, this is government cuts on the operators, which then means that they have to make cuts out of their own budget because, you know, it's very difficult for them to keep everything going.
I agree with that, but...
So just so, because obviously this is all just come through, and there's only 3 weeks to respond to this, isn't there, as well? Dave, do you want to come in before I just read? There's a list here.
I could come in this. I'll just give that the briefest of backgrounds around where that's come from, and just so people are all aware. I'm sure they've seen it in the press. So it's come, as you say, from the Rail Delivery Group, but majority of the 1,000 offices over the whole country will be closed over the next 3 years. They've gone out to consultation of this. This has been pushed through from Department for Transport, and it's linked to issues around the modernisation of the rail industry as well. But where we're at here, and we have 69 stations in West Yorkshire, of which 19 are staffed, And the proposal as things stand is to close all ticket offices except Bradford Interchange, Huddersfield and Leeds. So some really significant impacts there across West Yorkshire as things are proposed. And not only that, I think that the wider issue is around the changes in the staffing hours where there are stations as well. So where there are waiting room, where the staff will be redeployed, the staffing hours will most likely be changed and reduced. So that may mean the waiting rooms may not be open for as long as they currently are. There's a lack of detail around this at the moment, and there's a very, very tight timescale. 3 weeks has been given for the timescale on consultation around this. Just heard some news through. There's been a briefing through Transport for the North this morning as this meeting's going on, and I think collectively across the North they're looking to push for an extension on that timescale from the 28 days to 56 days, which is still, you know, it's less than what we would say as our consultation periods that we would like to go with. There are a number of wider issues here around, you know, whether ticket machines are going to sell all ticket types, whether passengers, customers are going to get the best value tickets out of this. How does it work at bank holidays? Big area. I think you already mentioned, Councillor Korshik, is around the equality impacts of this, and I think there is a wide push across the North again to push back on the EQIAs and the lack of EQIAs that's been done to date. Not all of the train operators have done them on these already, and I think that's probably linked to the tight timescales that they've had associated with this decision being made. So we are liaising as things stand with other authorities. We will be putting in our own representations ourselves as an authority and taking views on that. Obviously some serious issues which we are taking very seriously.
Chair, with your permission, can you write a letter to them and just opposing the decisions they are making it now?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that also this is sort of hot off the press, isn't it? I'm just reading the list here. We've got, is this right? This list, this Bingley. So all these stations affected, but Bingley, Foster Square, yeah. So Bingley, Brat Foster Square, Ilkley, Keighley, Menston, Shipley, Halifax, Hebden Bridge, Todmorden, Dewsbury, Crossgates, Garforth, Guiseley, Horsforth, New Pudsey, Wakefield, Westcott, and in Leeds, Huddersfield and Bradford Interchange, I think there'd still be a reduction in ticket office hour at times. It's not that they'd be unaffected. So that's a lot of impact, isn't it? And just to give us 3 weeks to get something in there, as you say, Councillor Korshik, we should write regarding that. I mean, obviously, people have realised their stations have been affected. I've got Councillor Patient, then Councillor Firth, and Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. And interestingly, I've just got a reporter pestering me about this very issue as this meeting's going on. He'll hopefully speak to. But I just think it's important for us to remember the human element of this, because it's a story in and of itself, but it's also a story about a less inclusive society, and that means the people using it. So yesterday in Hebden Bridge, a user there talking to me who is going to feel really digitally excluded. Having that face-to-face with the staff there is the only way she interfaces with buying a ticket. She's not able to do it. She doesn't have a smartphone. She's scared to use a computer because she feels like doesn't know what she's doing, and she has tried in the past. So I think there's a real concern there, and this is not even sort of thinking of the issue of people's jobs as well in all of this, and the safety that having a presence at station provides. So you mentioned Halifax there. I mean, it's the main town in Calderdale, so all of a sudden we're saying that the main train station for the whole of Calderdale is going to have no one there. So I think while we're thinking about an inclusive society, we're really missing a trick here. So cost-cutting measures are actually affecting people, and we've spoken a lot in this meeting about inclusion and diversity and stuff, and this really drills into the heart of that. So yeah, let's get people to sign on for it. Yeah, let's get people to feed in. But giving us 3 weeks is a bit of a joke, to be perfectly honest.
I agree. And looking at Halifax, the usage here I've got is 1.165 million people. That's not insignificant, is it really? I had, who do I have after that? Councillor Firth.
Thank you, Chair. Just following that, it's just another, this whole plan is outrageous. It's just another blow to working people, to travelling people, and it shows just how incompetent, inept and out of touch this government is, and we must fight it. The RMT has been campaigning on this for quite a long time now. Totally ignored by government, and I'm a funny feeling they will totally ignore us. But that doesn't stop us having a fight with them and trying to change their mind. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. Can I strongly endorse what's been said so far? I would agree with all of those points, and this affects my ward, it affects Guiseley, it also affects Menston, which quite a few of my residents use as well. So I think in addition to all of the points which have been made as well, which I think need to be made really strongly, it's about that loss of expertise, it's about the staff at our stations who do amazing work, and they fulfil so many more roles than simply selling tickets, and I think we need to really emphasise that. But also when we're thinking about people coming to our area, when we think about people, we've got quite a few places which are very popular with visitors, but also other places that we would like to market. And the people who work at stations can be vital sources of information, and as I say, vital sources of support, and for people feeling safe, for people feeling comfortable when they're travelling, and so I think we've really got to emphasise that as well, and to support the RMT working on this, and I think if we lose these people and we lose their knowledge, we're not going to get it back, and I think we've really got to hammer home that point as well, and I just think it's an appalling proposal from the government.
Thank you, Councillor McLaughlin.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd totally like to echo the comments made by all the colleagues around the table. Not only is it outrageous, it's typical, isn't it? It's typical of a government that doesn't see people as people, it sees them as numbers. It looks at ticket officers as they're for selling tickets. They don't sell that many tickets anymore because technology is changing, therefore they're not value for money. They don't measure, because they can't be bothered to measure, how safe you feel using the transport system, how many crimes, fights, assaults didn't happen because there were staff there. The confidence you can feel knowing that there is somebody there to ask when something goes wrong, and as we can all testify in this room, things go wrong very often, particularly in the train sector. So maybe most people don't use ticket officers to buy tickets anymore, but I tell you what, every single one of those passengers goes to the person in uniform when the train's delayed or cancelled to find out what's going on and get that update. Some call centre who won't be getting live updates themselves, or some machine, is just not good enough. It's totally an inhuman way of looking at a system, and that's to say nothing for the safety and the inclusion of people with sight problems, disabilities, the elderly, who need to get on and off trains with assistance. It's ridiculous. But not wishing to sound like a total grump today, can I say congratulations to you, Chair, for your appointment as Vice Chair of the Transport for the North, which was good, and also say how welcome the news is about the investment for Huddersfield Narrow Canal, which is in my ward, so a bit parochial there. But not only is that the bit of the canal that needed the investment more than the others, but also it can provide 2 or 3 villages commuting access through a greenway to Huddersfield, which is excellent, but also it's a flat and accessible way to enjoy the beautiful countryside, which I know during COVID saved my mental health, that towpath did. So it's not all bad news, but the ticket officers, as colleagues have said, outrageous, and solidarity with the RMT.
Thank you very much. I'm obviously hearing very strong views about the proposed closure of those offices, and that sort of supports what Councillor Kaushik said about me writing a letter. Councillor Anwar.
I just want to echo in on the concerns and shares of my colleagues. And my mum is 76 years old. If I dropped her off at Dewsbury train station and told her to catch a train to Leeds, she would need assistance of a travel officer there to make sure she purchased the correct ticket to guide her to the platform. Without these services, I don't think they should even have a train station there. These are the basic services for the elderly, the disabled people, to have people there. In Dewsbury, according to statistics, last year, we've had over 1 million passengers get off and get on the train from there. On a daily basis, it's 2,907 passengers. So not having officers working there is just ridiculous. And the last 13 years of this government just goes to show how out of touch they are with ordinary folk. And every time you see a headline regarding the government, it's always to do with cuts. And they just don't make any sense or have any credibility to hold their value.
Thank you very much, Councillor Anwar. Councillor Hannan.
Thank you very much, Chair. Would it be possible to get an extension on this consultation? Because I do feel that the window of opportunity for people to come back with their concerns is very narrow. And as a combined authority, we need people to engage in the consultation. Could that be looked into, please?
That's a very good point, and I think there is already moves afoot to try and extend that from what you were saying. I think, was it from 28 to 56?
From 21 to 56, there's a push through Transport for North, but we'll be pushing the same ground now.
I think it's a good point though, because we do need to let people know about this as quickly as possible. And I wonder, actually, through the bus engagement leads, we need to add something in as well to say the bus engagement leads need to be enabling other people in their bus network to know about this, because they're also connected with the rail stations as well, and all the transport that goes in those local communities, that, you know, they have those access to those people, don't they, really? So but it doesn't leave an awful lot of time to get people's views known, does it? And it is a problem, as Councillor Hannan said.
It is, and I think we're catching up later today to work through how we deal with that.
So is there anybody else we should be informing? I'm just thinking about, obviously, bus engagement leads have those connections. Councillor Firth, do you have any?
No, but I just want to thank colleagues for support and our officers for doing what they're doing. But I just, on a point of sadness, by the way, and education for colleagues, only a couple of weeks ago we celebrated Dewsbury Railway Station's 175th birthday. And we had a bit of a party in front of the station, but in 170 years, it's always been manned. 175 years manned. And to take that, the staff away from Dewsbury, it's absolutely appalling. But I've had a little bit of education.
No, absolutely. Councillor Khan, are you waving your pen, or do you want to speak? So? You're sorry, I wasn't quite sure, so sorry if I should have brought you in earlier.
Just to echo the words of colleagues across the room, it's a very, very important issue, particularly when it comes to safety of the elderly, and I think for females, and it's very important that we send a strong message from this meeting, particularly for Wakefield, where I'm from. Wakefield, Westgate, Solly Station at the moment, if I'm right, that's got a reception at the moment, so it's going to have a massive impact on Wakefield residents, but wherever, this obviously is going to have a massive impact wherever this happens, so hopefully we can send a massive, important message from this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kilbane, did you want to come in? Obviously, York presumably is similarly affected with different stations.
Well, really just to support all the comments that have already been made. I mean, York isn't on the call list this time, but this is a direction of travel that must be absolutely resisted, and just wanted to express solidarity with all those who are affected and support you in any way we can in any campaign to protect the ticket officers, not least because of the equality impact that it will have. And it's not just 76-year-old mums. I mean, I'm a 56-year-old fairly IT literate person, and I went to try and buy a return to Durham the other day using one of them machines and trying to work out what the most appropriate, cheapest. You need a degree in maths and computing to work the blooming thing, so just ended up pushing some random buttons and hoping they were the ones that would do it. So absolutely needs to be resisted. It's just going to actually stop people travelling on the railways at a very time when we need them to be getting back on to the railways.
Indeed, it does seem a very short-term measure of government to cut this, doesn't it, and leave us with this issue. Councillor Hutchinson.
Just declaring I'm a trustee for Halifax Society for the Blind, but I have alerted the society to get our members to actually engage with the consultation, and can I encourage us all to liaise with our disability access forums, with our elderly residents forums as well, to try and make sure that the people who are likely to be most impacted by this are aware and have a chance to actually have their say.
Thank you. I think that's a very good point, and I just wonder if we should be writing as combined authority to those access forums, actually, to let them know and give them the opportunity to contribute to the consultation. Councillor Maloney.
I'd just like to echo and sort of push the point about the safety of women and girls I know that ticket officers aren't there as protection or as bouncers at train stations, but sort of perceived safety is a big thing. So if you're getting the train at 7 o'clock in the morning and there's no one there, I think it is very scary. So they're dark places, train stations, in those shorter days. So just having someone in a uniform or just someone else there definitely changes the vibe of the place. I think just pushing that is really important.
It's absolutely vital. It's a very good point, well made. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Just to expand upon my colleague, Councillor Carnes' point about Wakefield being the last ticketing office we've got in the district, Wakefield Westgate, sorry. I think I read somewhere about the reason for these cuts is because only 12% of people are actually using ticket offices, but I think we've got about 1.8, 1.9 million people using Wakefield Westgate, so I mean that's what about 220,000 just off the top of my head, which a year, which is a hell of a lot of people, which I suspect are probably the most vulnerable, elderly, you know, people with disabilities and things like that. So these definitely, it needs resisting. There's obviously a lot of demand there for, you know, face-to-face ticket services, so we need to do all we can to keep them. Thank you.
It's 1.8 million, just looking at these figures, Councillor Williamson, so you're absolutely right. Just 12% of that is a huge number, isn't it? Councillor Rowe.
Yeah, I just wondered, I've used ticket machines a number of times, and they're not always broken, but there's been a number of times when they have been broken. So should we be pushing for some kind of reassurance that if people getting on trains where the ticket machines are broken, that there's going to be some leniency showed against these fines, because it should just be incredibly unfair.
Absolutely, so that's something else we need to make a point of in the consultation. Councillor Hayden.
Just really quickly as well, I don't ever use the ticket machine, but I took my Ukrainian guest to the person behind the desk at Cross Gates and to get a ticket to Hull, and it was much cheaper from the ticket office than it was in the machine, because they don't offer you the trip to Durham is another example. You can get good prices online, however, we're using those machines, you are paying above the odds.
So again, it's an equality issue, isn't it, really? So the EIA needs to be absolutely spot on. Councillor Edwards.
Thank you. A point which hasn't been made so far, but which develops on what Councillor Hayden was saying there, is we have significant numbers of people, especially in Leeds and Bradford, but actually across the region, for whom English is an additional language. There are a significant number of people who either don't speak English or who have limited English, who would really struggle with one of these machines. And for those people, it's essential as well to be able to go up to people who can help them, who can support them. And I think that's a point that we should be making as well, for all of the region, but particularly for the big cities.
Thank you very much. So I'm not seeing anybody else indicating. I think it was a fairly strong show of support for us to make sure we expand probably actually on these recommendations in this paper, just looking at that. So obviously we note the update for the report, but I think I would also suggest that we need to add in those recommendations that I, as chair of this committee, write on behalf of the committee to governments objecting strongly to this proposal. That should also go into the very short frame of consultation that we've got. I think, and obviously you heard the consultation response should include everything that people have said today, like safety of women and girls, like access for people with disabilities, like you know, so an inclusion issue about people with English additional language and not being fined on the train, etc. It's all things that are going to increase people's cost of living crisis. And then additionally, I think we need to add a third recommendation then that we ask the combined authority officers to make sure that disability access groups and other groups, bus engagement group for example, who will also use rail transport, are all informed about the short frame that they have to reply to this. So if we can make sure that that goes in as well. So are people okay with that? Is that so with those additions then, can I see those in favour of the recommendations with the additional two that I've just outlined? Thank you very much. All those against, please show. Abstentions? No, that was unanimous. Thank you very much. Now moving on to the next item, project approvals. Melanie Corcoran.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So we've got 2 items for consideration today, and the first of those Rachel has identified in her report. So we're looking at the Active Travel Fund Tranche 4. I'm going to ask Steffi Nolan to give us a brief overview of this first item.
Thank you, Melanie. Yes, so I'm going to cover Active Travel Fund Tranche 4 and also the Capability Fund, which the Strategic Outline case covers both of these. So Active Travel Fund Tranche 4 is building on the Emergency Active Travel Fund and Tranches 2 and 3 of the Active Travel Fund, focusing on delivering improved and safer walking, wheeling and cycling infrastructure across West Yorkshire. We've been awarded just over 17 million as a region to deliver 16 schemes. And then the Capability Fund programme is looking at behaviour change interventions across the region at both a district and region-led level to encourage and enable cycling, wheeling and walking access, and it will also assist in developing a pipeline of schemes for future active travel funded works by carrying out feasibility studies. And in the Capability Fund, we were awarded just over £2.5 million. Both of these bids have been funded through Active Travel England and have been built up in partnership between the 5 partner councils and the combined authority. In terms of the impact of these schemes, Active Travel Fund will make it easier for more people to walk to work, education and training opportunities more sustainably and by more affordable means when compared to private car ownership. And the Capability Fund will support in developing policy initiatives and the development of feasibility for a pipeline of schemes ready to be prepared for future funding calls, as Rachel mentioned, in terms of the 5th tranche of Active Travel Fund that will be coming soon. And it will also, the Capability Fund will also contribute and expand the combined authority's existing behaviour change programme to encourage and enable wider use of cycling, wheeling and walking. In terms of the cost of the scheme, the total cost across the Capability Fund and the Active Travel Fund is £19,961,635, and this specific request is looking for £6,024,276, which is development and delivery costs across both of those funding streams. The decision that we're seeking is that the Active Travel Fund Tranche 4 programme proceeds through Decision Point 2, Strategic Outline Case, and work can commence on development of individual project business cases as outlined in the report, and that the Capability Fund programme proceeds through Decision Point 2 into Activity 5 into delivery, subject to a programme level approval to proceed. We're looking for an indicative approval to the combined authority's contribution of £19,961,635, and for those individual approval of £6,024,276,000 to be released. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments or questions on that one? Councillor Hutchinson?
The tranche 4 of active travel funding obviously covers a range of projects, some of which will be at an earlier stage of development than others. I mean, very much welcome the funding to the scheme within that largely affects my ward, but that has already had feasibility studies funded by central government. So I was just wondering whether the various stages of approval all these projects need to be in lockstep, that nothing is approved until they're all approved, or whether each one goes to the different stages at possibly separate times.
Councillor Hutchinson, are you asking for joined-up government?
Not necessarily.
Okay, I would say just steady. But Steffi, would you be able to respond to the councillor's concerns?
Yes. So the 16 separate schemes will proceed through the assurance process individually. So where schemes are more developed, they can progress more quickly. And we've also looked to expedite that process where possible. So schemes are making use of the new business justification case as well, where possible, so that they don't have to do a full business case if it's not required.
Lovely, thank you very much. Any more questions, comments on that one? No. Lovely. In that case, we move on to Fiona Lim. I think you're going to do Dewsbury Cleckheaton Sustainable Travel Corridor.
Thank you, Chair. So this report relates to a change request for the A638 Dewsbury to Cleckheaton Sustainable Travel Corridor scheme, which extends approximately 8.4 kilometres between Oakenshaw in the north through Cleckheaton, Hetman-Wyke and onto Dewsbury. The outline business case was approved in June 2022 with an indicative total allocation of 12.88 million, the majority of which was coming from the Transforming Cities Fund, with a small amount of active travel funding in addition. This change request is seeking approval to increase that indicative budget from the 12.88 million to 15.799 million, and to also draw down development funding of £560,000 to complete the FBC for the scheme. The increase in the project costs are to be funded utilising the headroom that was created through the TCF programme following the inflation review prioritisation exercise that was concluded in December 2022. So following the approval of the outline business case, the cost for delivering the scope of the scheme that was approved have increased by around £7.1 million. And the key factors that have led to this cost increase include obviously the ongoing inflationary pressures on the construction rates. There has been some greater cost accuracy for the project through undertaking early contractor involvement who have reviewed the scheme costs and provide some more greater assurance of what those would be once the scheme gets to the market. There also needs to be design review and changes to increase the quality of the cycling infrastructure in line with the LTN 120 guidance. So there is now going to be segregated cycle lanes along the A638 between Cleckheaton and Hetman-Wyke, and also a widened and lit section of the Spen Valley Greenway. And there's also, and this is probably the bulk of the cost increase, there's been design alterations to incorporate a retaining structure and avoid the need to purchase third-party land for the key bus lane intervention at the Chain Bar roundabout. And this particular aspect of the scheme provides significant bus journey time savings in the peak hours. So the change request is seeking to proceed with a new preferred option which can be delivered within the revised indicative budget of 15.799 million. And that includes the bus lane, 0.72 kilometres of bus lane at Chain Bar, 1.3 kilometres of segregated cycle lane between Cleckheaton and Hetman-Wyke, 12 improved formal pedestrian crossings, 8 junction improvements and 7 new signalised pedestrian crossings. There'll be upgrades to 5 bus stops to smart bus stops between Chain Bar roundabout and Leeds Road, and 2.1 kilometres of widening, resurfacing and lighting of the Spen Valley Greenway, as well as access improvements along that section of the Spen Valley Greenway. So what's been reduced is the removal of a signalised crossing at the junction of Wakefield Road and Leeds Road, and also there's been a reduction in the amount of widening on the Spen Valley Greenway between the M62 and Walkley Lane. The BCR for the scheme is on paper quite low, however it does still have a strong strategic fit through enabling faster and more reliable bus journey times and improving active travel infrastructure to support the modal shift to bus, walking and cycling. So set out in the report on paragraph 4.75, we recommend that the Transport Committee approves the change to increase the budget and approves the revision of the outputs of the scheme and the release of the further development funding. The scheme will then progress to the FBC submission later this year in October, with approval expected in January and the start on site March next year and completion a year later. Thank you.
Thank you, Fiona. Do you want to just take your microphone off there, please? Thank you. Obviously, as I go through life, I understand that BCRs are really the price of something, the value of nothing, aren't they really? Because obviously, as we've already discussed in this meeting, that the value of what transport does is not really always quantified in a government business case, which is all about pound signs. So, anybody any questions, comments on that? Councillor Firth.
Thank you, Chair. This falls under my portfolio back at Kirklees, and I've spent an inordinate amount of time with officers going through this scheme. As you realise when you read the papers, it's already been going a couple of years now from its inception. It's a long route, 8.4 kilometres, it says so in the report. There'll be a lot of destruction, but it's well worth doing, and I can't wait till it gets through the full business case and we start putting spades in the ground. Thank you, and I hope you do support it, colleagues.
Thank you, and that is one of the beauties of doing this work, isn't it, really? It's wonderful to see that change. It does take a long time, it needs to be planned properly, but this, you know, just to reflect, it is work that will be providing benefit to our residents and businesses for many years to come. Exactly, which is always good, Councillor Firth. Better links between Bradford and Kirklees is something we all welcome. Any more questions, comments on that? So we have those schemes obviously in this paper. I'm happy to propose we accept the recommendations to progress them. Can I see all those in favour, please show? Any against? That is carried. Thank you very much, officers. Please get them done as quickly as possible. Thank you. So, moving on to the final paper on the agenda today, which is governance arrangements. This includes just the new people who are on the committee, terms of reference, transport committee, terms of reference, and the job descriptions of all our deputies and myself, and also the dates of the meeting. I understand, obviously, Councillor Firth doesn't quite fit with executive meetings in Kirklees, so I understand your meeting dates for you are not personally useful, and I understand that. So I don't know if you wanted to say something on that now.
Yes, I do feel there should have been some consultation on this with members. I know there's lots of new members here, but the Transport Committee has functioned very well for more than a decade, perhaps 2 decades, works well on a Friday. Because the Combined Authority set these dates after we've set our dates back in the office, our districts, it's going to cause all sorts of problems, I'm sure, for colleagues, but certainly for me. Kirklees members, all of us, would like you to reconsider these dates. If not, we won't vote against on the paper. We will certainly vote against these dates being pursued.
Thank you very much, Councillor Firth. Councillor Koshy, do you want to come?
Yeah, I agree with what Councillor Firth is saying. Like, you know, when I first got appointed, I want to change the date, but they strongly said no, either be on the committee or not. So consider it's only for one person why we are doing that.
Thank you. I think it's probably more than one person, which is why we're doing it in the first place. Councillor Anwar.
Yeah, I just want to support my colleagues' thoughts on that. I'm also on the licensing and planning committees, and also on the planning substitute. So the planning meetings could fall any day from Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and also licensing is always on a Thursday. So if there's a double meeting, it'll cause a bit of a hassle to get someone to substitute me over in Kirklees so I can make it here.
Thank you. So I think it's not just one member, I think there's a few members who struggle for a Friday. So I think the idea was to move it over different days of the week, so that obviously it's going to inconvenience some members sometimes, but you're not excluding members having it the same day of the week all the time. Now, happy to look at some in the future, perhaps if we can move 1 or 2, that'd be great. But in the meantime, so we do need to set these dates so people have got them in the diary. So I would like to recommend we accept this paper with the proviso that we'll look at them in the future. Thank you.
Do I gather that you will consider the future dates? Even though you're approving them today, you may reconsider some of the dates.
If we can find one
forward.
that suits more people, Councillor Firth, I'll obviously always be happy to do that. But for the moment, we do need to get on with diarising. So if that's okay, I would like to recommend we accept the paper as is. And obviously, as you say, if there's anything extraordinary we can do in the future to support Kirklees colleagues in that, I would be happy to do so. So with that, can I recommend we accept the recommendations here today? Can I see all those in favour, please show? Thank you very much. Against? Thank you, that is carried. And obviously, with colleagues in Kirklees, we'll do what we can to support you with arrangements in the future. Thank you very much. And that concludes the meeting today. Thank you very much, everybody, for attending. Thank you to those colleagues. It's your first meeting. And there'll be lots of exciting things on the agenda in the future. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.